Well, hi everyone, Ron Vaillant here. Hope you're doing well. Well, here we are in an unprecedented situation in Canada now that the US, particularly Trump, is talking about annexing our country. And we've never been here before. And so let's talk about it and see what's going on. Now, when he first mentioned this idea, I took it very seriously. I didn't think he was bluffing or it was just art of the deal. I saw it as a decades old plan to be able to amalgamate Canada, US, and Mexico into one EU type of state. And in fact, I even wrote about it. I'll put a link in the description area below the video, and it's in Western Standard, and you can go ahead and take a look at it. It's not very long, but I'll be covering some of it here as well. But how is it possible that we're in this situation? And really, I think the thing we need to do is just step back a little bit and look at our country and how the Liberals and the Conservatives are the only two parties that have governed Canada. And where have they led us to? We're in this very weak position now that we are not able to make very many moves laterally or whichever way, on account of what they've done or their lack of governorship. Now, if I was a prime minister, the first thing I would have done is made national security the most important element, really. And that is because, you don't know who is going to want to take you over. Canada's a small population, and larger countries would be very envious to be able to take us over to get our natural resources. So you would have to make it so that if anyone was to try and take you over in a military way, that they would be like taking on a badger or a wolverine. If you ever go toe to toe with those guys, you know that you're going to be in for a world of hurt. And that would have to be something that would be done. Not only that, but warfare can be done on many different levels, and we see it happening right now. It's you got psychological warfare, and you've got all kinds of 21st century covert warfare where you can manipulate the country and you can steer it in a direction you want it to go. And our successive governments have allowed this to happen. You got the Conservatives; they've allowed China to have unprecedented power through their created FIPA, and Pierre Poilievre was there when that happened. And now you've got China here, and also, from what I understand, they have control of a port even in Vancouver, and up in Fort McMurray. I've heard that they can fly direct flights from China right to Fort McMurray, right into their tar sands compound. We also have in Canada, if you can believe it, at least 6 Chinese police stations. How was that even possible? And really, if it wasn't for the U.S. Powerhouse being our next door neighbor, we would have been taken over a long time ago, and we'd probably be speaking Chinese at this point in time. So we never thought, generally speaking, that it would be the U.S. that would want to take us over. But here we are. And so this is the reason why it would be fundamental to be able to have national security set up by our successive governments. We should at least have a pipeline going across Canada instead of going it down to Michigan and relying on them to be good neighbors to send it back to Eastern Canada. When Trump was talking about all these different various things, he was talking about fentanyl being the problem, the border being an issue, the trade deficit, and all these kind of things. All of this basically is just theater. It's not really the real issue. It's not the reason why he'd want to take us over. I mean, those things can be negotiated out and dealt with, but there's a bigger thing at play, and that is to be able to create a European-style union, I guess, at minimum, of the Canada, US, and Mexico. And now it looks like it's going to be Greenland as well. What we have here is a situation where you got the United States with 10 times the economy of Canada and the population as well. And we have all of our political talking heads in Canada primarily saying, we got to go, and he's being a bully, and we got to go ahead and fight him back with these tit-for-tat tariffs. And there's no way that Canada can win a tariff war I mean, we might be able to give a black eye, but I mean, we're going to have our arms and legs ripped off. And and this is not the way that Canada should be dealing with this whole situation. And it makes me very suspicious when you get the talking heads. We've seen what these politicians have done in the past and how they're really UN globalists, right? And for them to all have the same sort of talking points, so we have to go ahead and go headlong into some big trade war, is very suspicious. And one thing, with Jagmeet Singh, whatever he does, that's a very good counter indication of what should be done. So he says, oh, the U.S. is acting like a bully and we got to go and teach a bully a lesson. Well, if that's what he's saying, then maybe the thing to do is the opposite. And I'm not just basing it on that, but I'm just kind of making a point about him. That you don't want to be doing anything that he is suggesting. Trump was asked in a press conference, you talked about taking over Greenland and the Panama Canal using military force, or would you use military force with Canada? And he said, no, economic force. And so you don't think that this thing has been war gamed out? I mean, this is not just Trump just talking off the top of his head. I mean, all of the executive orders and everything that's been set in play has been done, long before he got into office. And he's just basically acting as a puppet master to execute all these things. He's the front man. He's the actor. And if you don't think that this has been extensively war gamed, I mean, okay, you go ahead and put 25% tariffs on Canada. Well, what's Canada going to likely do? Oh, they're not going to take it. They're going to stand up to the bully and they're going to do a 25% tariff on U.S. goods. Okay, now what's and these politicians, they act tough and everything else like that, but they're not the ones who are going to be losing their jobs and their houses and their cars in a trade war. Definitely, they would be thinking, okay, Canada would retaliate with their tariffs. So then what's the next move after that? Well, is the U.S. going to bump up the tariffs to 50%? Okay, let's say they do that. Okay, and Canada is going to do the same? Like you're in a no-win situation if you go and toe-to-toe on that playing field. And what does that really mean, to go ahead and to start putting 25% on the U.S. goods as well? Canadians are having a hard enough time just surviving as it is. And now you're going to make those products 25% more expensive? And people will say, yeah, we're just going to boycott all this stuff. Well, what about the cars that you want to buy that it's, made, on both sides of the border? You willing to pay another 10 grand for a car or more? There's another thing that people have to factor in, and that is, on the World Economic Forum's website, they posted the video talking about by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy. So is this, all of these political talking heads, are they pushing us into this trade war for maybe that purpose? It's just going to hurt all of us financially in the end. Yeah, we simply cannot win a trade war with the United States. There has to be another strategy in play. You can still push back, but what's a smarter way of doing it? It's like if you were in a jungle and a 900-pound gorilla came up to you and he starts, getting in your face and start pushing you around and everything else like that. Are you going to go ahead and do a sidewinder and try and do a knockout punch on him? Well, he'll just eat that up, no problem, and then he'll rip your arms and legs off. You don't stand a chance. I mean, the better play would be to do something that he wouldn't be expecting. Maybe some kind of evasive thing. Maybe it might be distraction. Something different than to just go head to head on that level. And so with Canada, the smarter thing to do would be to, Canada is known as a very peaceful nation all around the world. And if we can make it look like the U.S. is just being an absolute bully against us, we can gain sentiment around the world for that. And not only that, but the more important thing is to get sentiment from the U.S. citizens, right? And they didn't vote for Trump to go and annex Canada. And that's where you have to really play the cards. And so myself, what I would try and do is encourage all of the Canadian businesses not to discount their products to eat up that 25%, but to just keep the prices as they are. And when the Americans, businesses and citizens order from Canada, then you say, okay, that's our price, and here is a Trump tax on top of it. And it'll be very clear that it's Trump who's making inflation happen in the United States. Trump says he invented the name groceries almost, right? And he talked about the pricing of groceries going down. But now if people can see, okay, this is the price of the groceries that come from Canada, and here is a Trump tax, and get people educated as to what's really going on here. And if you can get the people to have a big outcry, then you might be able to push a needle a bit. Although I don't think so. I think it's going to have to be that, it would be that you try and work it out so that in 2 years that the votes might swing the other way so that they don't have power in the Senate. But for us to go toe to toe is just going to cause tremendous damage to us as Canadians. The other strategy, and that's going on right now, is that Canadians are now boycotting U.S. goods. And they're thinking about not going and crossing the border for their vacations and going to the U.S. All of these things will play without costing Canadians anything as far as, any kind of big tariffs on U.S. goods. And, there's some U.S. goods that we simply have to be able to have. You can't get them any other place. So, and the other thing, too, is that a lot of the Americans, especially the smaller businesses where you might buy from and bring goods up, I mean, they're not necessarily interested in the U.S. taking over Canada. So they're kind of like in the same situation that we are. We're kind of all being blindsided by this. And so is it really fair to punish them as well? But some say, well, they voted for Trump, they should be punished. But that's another story, I guess. But so anyhow, Canada needs to come up with a different solution. And then they're saying, oh, we'll just cut off the electricity and, the oil down to the States. Well, okay, we can look at the ideal of that. I mean, maybe with the Hydro-Quebec power, you might be able to shut it off and not, cause havoc as far as your infrastructure of your dams to do that. I don't know the implications of that, but I'm sure they can probably switch off generating power in some way. That's an angle that maybe can be done, but that really ups the ante, I suppose. To turn off the oil from Syncrude, though, that's a whole different thing. You can't just flip a switch and have it just shut down. There's all of that bitumen and everything else is in the pipes, and it's all through their whole processing facilities and everything else like that. It takes a bit to wind that down and to start it up again. And then not to mention, okay, so who's going to really pay the price here for doing such a move? It's going to be all the workers who will be laid off. They're the ones who are going to lose their homes and their cars, kind of a thing. And then people will say, well, okay, we'll just go, there's unemployment insurance, but that'll be tapped out if you start doing this en masse. And then it'll have to be that Canada's going to have to borrow even more money from private banks in order to be able to float these people. So it just, we could see our debt double just on account of trying to manage this situation with all of these workers losing all their jobs. And is it really going to cause the turnaround that we want? Because make no mistake, they've wargamed this, and I'm sure they've thought about these things. And their end goal is to be able to amalgamate us into this European Union style system. And there's been talk ever since World War II of setting up the world in 10 regions. And you got North America, South America, Europe, and Asia, Pacific, and on, right? So here we are, and we're facing this now, and we're in a very weak position to be able to do a strong, knockout punch to be able to back down, Trump on and whoever's behind him pushing for all these things. So to finish off, I mean, this situation is not very good, as we all know. And we are in for a world of hurt. Just think about what that really means to economically force us to join and become the 51st state. We're going to be brought to our knees. We'd have to be brought to our knees. There's so many Canadians saying, I'll fight to the death and everything else like that. But will Canadians really do that? And now, it reminds me of back in 2019, I got interviewed, and the interviewer was asking me, so why is it that you want to be able to run in this federal election? And I said, I would much rather try and save Canada wearing a suit than wearing combat boots in 20 years. And he just thought that was just off the wall. And here we are, 6 years later, and we're looking at being taken over by another country. All these Canadians talk about wearing combat boots now, whereas really all they had to do was vote in for the PPC, and we could have actually averted a lot of this thing. The United States still might have wanted to take us over, yes, but we could have actually helped position Canada to be far more resilient and to be able to handle these tariffs and what may come our way. But because one of the things that would have happened, we would have opened up the ability to put a pipeline across through Canada and stay in Canada. Whereas, the Conservatives, they were going to do this energy corridor and have everyone agree to it, when Quebec all along has said, no, we don't want it through our, so the Conservatives make it look like they're trying to get this pipeline in, when really they know that it won't happen. They had Stephen Harper and for 8-9 years, none of this stuff has gone on. But in order for Canada to capitulate and to join in with the U.S. like this, it's going to have to be that we're on our knees. And there'll have to be politicians in place who basically are UN globalists, which they all are, who will flip-flop, and say, well, we got to go ahead and do this now. And so there we are. And another thing to actually look at, really, I think, is besides trying to mount our efforts and push back and everything else like that, is the what if. What if Canada was to become the 51st state or something along those lines? Now, there's been a divide in Canada between the West and the East, particularly between Alberta and Quebec, and the Albertans wouldn't want to be able to be a state with Quebec, and with the Laurentian elite. Because Alberta's been pushed around and treated very badly for decades. And so that's another thing that people don't want to probably think about, but it might be worthwhile looking at the plan B, all right? And how would that work out? And now in Alberta, as an example, there's probably maybe 20-25% of the people who would want to see Alberta's separation from Canada, right? And now, given that it would be the 51st state instead of just going on your own, that might actually jump up now. It might be 40%. I'm not too sure. I know there's a lot of people who do not like the idea at all, but there's also quite a few who do. Because divorce happens when the situation you're in is so bad that another situation looks better. And because Alberta has been abused and bullied around and financially just devastated on account of these transfer payments that have gone over to various different provinces, people are upset with that. They work hard and they're just being sucked dry. And so you're going to have that situation where Alberta might just want to go ahead and separate. And how would they do that? I mean, normally to separate, it would require the other provinces to okay it and everything else like that. But what if a situation happened where they just unilaterally did a vote and they said, we want to separate, and just by sheer might of the United States saying, okay, we're going to go and annex Alberta, to start. And then if you don't like it, well, that's tough, right? And then now you're talking military. It'll be a military conflict. Anyhow, so here we are, and it's pretty wild times. Now, I know people who have said that they would actually take up arms and fight for Canada, and my position is I won't do that. For the last 6 years, I've been trying to fight for Canada to do it in a very peaceful way, by people just simply voting. But I'm not going to be going and getting myself killed on account of the choice that Canadians have made, by putting us in this position, by putting in governments that don't have our best interests at hand and are UN globalist and want to see a situation that's varying from what perhaps we would want to see. And if we end up becoming part of the U.S., well, there we go. That's, times have changed. But we've put ourselves in a position to be picked off by one nation or another simply because of the way our governments have run this thing. So now, obviously, I don't expect everyone to agree with my points or anything else like that. I just thought I'd share them. And I know the natural reaction of almost everyone I've talked to. They say, no, we've got to push back. We got to do the tariffs. We can't be bullied around. But think about what that really means. And who's going to pay the price? It's going to be the workers who are going to lose their jobs. And it's going to make life a lot harder for all of us to have to deal with such an increase, because it's not just maybe 25% tariffs that we're talking about that will be imposed on Canadian businesses. I'm sure it'll go higher on account of Canada retaliating. And is Canada going to go all the way up and fight on that 50% thing? It's just going to cause absolute destruction of businesses and families and everything else like that. So anyhow, so that's the situation we're in, as we all know, and everyone's kind of freaked out about it. So anyhow, best to you, and hope we can all kind of fare through this okay. All right, bye.